Welcome back. Cases of romance fraud have increased internationally since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. More than €800,000 was scammed from Irish people in the first 5 months of this year. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Detective Superintendent Michael Crean from the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau, and I began by asking him about the profile of these fraudsters.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yes, we're talking about organised international crime gangs. They create false personas on dating sites. They have backstories, and they wait until they're matched by a victim. And the victim could be from anywhere in the world. And it is highly organised and is highly profitable crime for these international criminal organisations.
OK, tell us about how they ensnare their victims in this case, Superintendent. We hear that €800,000 has been taken so far this year, between January and May alone, from victims who've been caught up in this fraud trap. How do they find them? How do they target them?
Well, this type of crime exploded really during COVID. It has reduced now dramatically since the economy opened up. So what happens is the victim is on a dating website. They are matched with a male or with a person who he comes across as being almost a perfect person. Very quickly on, he will ask her to move off the messaging service of the app and move on to, we'll say, the likes of WhatsApp. He will get a lot of information out of her without really divulging too much about himself. And this, if we use a fishing analogy, this could go on for some time. He has hooked her, he reels her in over a period of time. And it may start then with like a tragic incident in his life where he loses his credit card or he's a victim of an assault. And I'm quite sure at the moment they're saying they're being held up at airports and their credit card isn't working and they ask for a small amount of money. And there may even be occasions where that first amount of money is actually paid back to build up the trust over a period of time. And more, then it's fees for customs, it's shipping fees, it's loans to help sick parents or operations for children. And it just builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And he has even gone into what we call investment fraud, where they offer advice on how to invest in we'll say, cryptocurrency as well. But it's all a fraud from the start. It's a stolen image he has used. It's a made-up backstory he is using.
You've made an arrest in this instance. Tell us about that particular arrest and how investigations are going in this area.
Yeah, we've made, over the last number of years, we've made a number of arrests in a number of different cases. This specific case is started in Hungary, where there was a victim there. She believed she was in a relationship with a man who was purporting to be a doctor. She sent him about $4,000. Eventually, she realised she had been defrauded and she reported it to the Hungarian police. From their investigations, they discovered that the money had been sent to a bank account in Ireland. They contacted us looking for assistance. When we examined the bank account, we discovered that there had been 46 suspicious credits to this account from 12 different people in 8 different European countries, including the first victim. The total amount of money was almost €110,000. And all the money came from 12 different females, and our suspicion will be that each of them is a victim of romance fraud. As I said, a male has been arrested in relation to this case, and our investigations are ongoing in conjunction with these other countries now to try and identify these victims and ensure that they are safe.
That was Detective Superintendent Michael Crean. Now our panel joins us here in studio. Journalist Sinead Ryan is still with me, and Fianna Fáil Senator Malcolm Byrne. And I'm also joined by psychotherapist Richard Hogan and Dr Nicola Fox-Hamilton, who work specifically in this area. To come to you first, Richard, when we talk about this, it appears that people are really very guarded generally, and when it comes to being aware of scams, we're more and more aware of what's out there. But where affairs of the heart are concerned, there is a vulnerability there, it seems.
There absolutely is, Claire, and we are very guarded about our financial details. But what happens, psychologically speaking, is that when we connect with someone, and these guys are preying on the most fundamental basic need, which is to connect with each other. And sometimes when we want to launch out into a romantic relationship, and in the first moments of that, it's very exciting. Parts of the brain are firing, dopamine, norepinephrine are firing, which really make us feel good. And that's what makes us so vulnerable. that we have this these chemicals being released that make us feel really, really like the reward center, the pleasure centers are firing. And so, not to get too technical, but the hypothalamus can sometimes short circuit the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking, right? Which is the logic
so you're
part.
blinded by love.
Which I'm sure my mother-in-law thought this when her daughter fell in love with me, that surely she's not thinking straight. But that's that part of the brain that short circuits logic. And so we might have all these warning signs, someone asking for money, but there might be a bit of cognitive dissonance because we see the signs, we see the warning signs, and we don't listen to them.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, and I was talking there to the superintendent about how specific people are targeted in this way. Tell us a little bit, Nicola, about the mindset of the criminals involved, where they're coming from in terms of, I suppose, their motivation and how easy they find all of this clearly to do.
So what happens with a lot of criminals is that they use what's called neutralizations in order to rationalize what they're doing and make themselves feel a bit better about it. And from the research on romance scammers, we know that they deny that there is a victim. So they've invested a lot in the relationship because the grooming process with victims takes a considerable amount of time, months up to 2 years before they even ask for money. And what they're doing in that process is giving the victim a romantic relationship. So they feel like the victim's part of that they've bought into this, and that if they're not smart enough or they're not savvy enough to catch on that it's a fraud, that they deserve what's coming to them. So they're not actually a victim. So that's one of the ways they rationalize it. And they rationalize away the risk by saying that what they're doing isn't really that harmful. It's not like murder. It's not that bad. That a lot of these people from, wealthy Western countries can afford to lose some money, and that they're greedy and this kind of thing.
And just on the way gangs like this operate, it's interesting, isn't it, that sometimes they employ a psychologist to work with them in targeting people.
Yeah,
So it's the art of manipulation very much at play here.
It really is. They are incredibly good at psychologically manipulating their victims. And unfortunately, some very unethical psychologists can get roped into dealing with these gangs and setting up the best way to make it work. And it is incredibly good what they do. It's a long game and people don't realize, and they're very involved in it. And, the superintendent was talking about how people talk a lot and give away a lot of information, and the scammer doesn't because they don't want to reveal anything about themselves. But that makes people feel very listened to in a way that they might not have in other parts of their life. And that's a very powerful thing, to feel heard and feel listened to. And that's one of the ways that they can really reel people in.
Sinead, you obviously in the line of, working on consumer issues. We're hearing an awful lot about scams now. Are you surprised to the extent at which this is happening when you hear of a figure like €800,000 so far this year?
Do you know what it is, Claire? I've been writing about this for years and years and years. Everything from, face creams by alleged celebrities that don't exist, to Bitcoin fraud, to bank phishing, to all this kind of stuff. I think it strikes me as shocking that it's still going on, because there's a huge amount about this now. And, Nicola's been, she's absolutely the expert, and she's been really kind there. I'm going to go with the line that, at this stage, if you have never met somebody that you're in a relationship with, if you have never asked, when I speak to dating agency bosses and I say, how can we stop this? They say, if you don't ask for somebody for a live video call early, you are not in a relationship. You don't have a relationship with somebody that you only know online. That's not real.
It's interesting that you say that, because we hear of all these catfishing cases and people do wonder, how can you have a relationship if you've never actually talked to this person or seen their face in a video capacity, but you're going on photos online. But people are really invested in those relationships, would you say?
Absolutely. Dating has irrevocably changed in the last 15 years. And so how we think about how we meet the people has changed massively. So online dating is how most people meet each other now, Claire. So it's not a massive stretch to meet somebody online and fall for them. And really what happens is people are lonely and isolated. Over the lockdown, over the last 2 years, people have disconnected from each other. So when somebody targets you, has your profile, understands, your likes, your dislikes, what movies you like, what books you read, and they tap into that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this person gets me. And what you said about being listened to, what a huge thing for us to feel, especially if we've been feeling low and we've been feeling isolated, for someone to really listen to you and to kind of connect with you in a fundamental way about your needs and what you like. That's so powerful.
Yeah, you know, when we hear about this, and Richard talking about the loneliness there and the isolation, you know, this is a scam that is, like I say, we hear about it on phone-in shows and the rest of it, but it's a scam that is clearly growing because of that isolation that people are feeling. From a regulatory point of view, Malcolm, is there anything that can be done about this?
I think there is the important message that this is a crime, and for anybody who has been a victim in these circumstances, they should feel comfortable being able to go to the Gardaí to report it, because we are going to see increasing evidence of cybercrime. It's estimated that last year that cybercrime, cyber attacks cost Ireland something of the order of €9.6 billion. From a regulatory point of view, there's certainly additional investment being made in the National Crime Centre. We're legislating at the moment with the Online Safety and Media Regulation Bill, which will set up a new media commission that will regulate the social media companies for the first time and place also an obligation on them.
Can they be held more to account? Could they be doing more? Or is this a case of, we're talking about how easy it is just to, you know, save a photo, take someone else's profile, set up a fake email account. All of these things are just so easy to do. Is it possible to...
It is. And I think part of the question is around account verification and how you deal with anonymous accounts and bots. And frankly, my view is that we can do a certain amount as legislators and regulators, but there is an obligation on the social media platforms to do more as well. And some of them, quite frankly, are not doing enough. It's estimated that probably on Twitter that something of about 20% of accounts on Twitter are bots or anonymous accounts. Very few of them are praising anybody. We published a report yesterday at the Oireachtas Sports Committee on the abuse of referees and officials in games. And these are not just professionals. These are people, you know, pitch side. And these have very real world consequences. And unfortunately...
we do make life comfortable for big tech here, don't we? Like when you see the number of HQs that are set up and the money being made by companies that have set up here in Ireland. With all of this, there's also the likes of how cash transfers and that technology has made it so easy for people to part with their money.
No, it is terribly difficult. And I mean, that is absolutely the serious aspect of this. It's not about the broken heart. Well, it is, but this is about serious money. And it is being transferred, and it's been transferred internationally and across borders. And there seems to be that the regulators very often and the banks cannot keep up with the pace at which this is changing and moving. And I would say to people out there, you know, you are far less likely to be scammed by somebody hacking into your bank account. I mean, that almost never happens. You're much more likely to be scammed by voluntarily handing over your own money.
Nicola, what are the red flags to look out for? Like, how should people spot this early, and what can they do to ensure the person they're talking to is the person they think it is?
So one of the red flags is someone who can't meet. So they've deliberately set up their profile so they can't meet. Now, of course, during lockdown, that made things more difficult because you didn't want to meet. And so that became a green flag. But I would say have a video chat with somebody very early on. Normally, these profiles are set up so that the person, usually the male profiles, they have some money. If they tell you their camera on their phone is broken, they can't FaceTime, those are red flags to look out for. So someone who just will not meet by video and keeps making excuses. Someone who love bombs you. So they immediately start declaring their love. They're extremely affectionate, extremely complimentary, really overwhelmingly so, and have you on the phone texting all the time. That's also a big red flag. It might feel lovely, but it's not how normal relationships develop. It's a lot faster. So those are really big things. It can take a long time before they ask for money, but definitely don't give money to somebody that you've never met.
And there is a stigma as well, Richard, just that people actually feel duped twice. They probably feel let down in a relationship they thought they were in, and also they've been defrauded.
Absolutely, and they feel, and that's, I think it's really underreported what's going on. I think the estimates are probably very conservative because people feel so shameful. And it's in those silent spaces that abuse thrives, and we must speak up. If we have, we're not, we're victims in this if we get targeted. It's the perpetrators that need to be looked at, and we have to go to the guards and we have to speak up for what's happened to us. Because as I said, when we're silent about it and we feel shame, that's the stigma. There should be no stigma. We were targeted by a criminal organisation. There's no stigma on us here. That's on them, and we need to report it.
OK, interesting one. And I suppose if people who are watching at home are kind of wary and wondering about, what's going on, and maybe they are giving away some cash, I take it the advice would be on this one, Sinead, is go to the guards, report it.
Yeah, do report it, and don't do it. I mean, don't give out money to somebody that you do not know, IRL, as the kids say, in real life. If you do not know them, you haven't had coffee, you haven't had lunch, and I would say, even if you have, keep your money to yourself.
OK, good advice. We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Richard, Malcolm and Nicola. After the break, we bring you the latest from the US as singer R. Kelly is jailed for 30 years. Stay with us.